House Republicans were successful in impeaching Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Now a select number of those GOP members are preparing for a potential trial in the Senate.
We really have to focus on the decisions that were made to essentially erase both the northern and southern borders.
Wyoming Republican Congresswoman Harriet Hageman would be an impeachment manager.
That's what this impeachment is focusing on, is the fact that he has violated federal law. There are two primary statutes that I think you've got to look at. And one of them states that you cannot do a mass parole into our country. The parole statute allows them to parole particular individuals on a case-by-case basis. For example, let's say that there is a family that comes over from Mexico and the child gets sick and they need to go to the hospital. What they would allow them to do is they would parole mom and dad with the child to go to the hospital. But that doesn't mean that you parole another million people into the country simply because one child needs medical care. And that is exactly what they've been doing. They have been paroling entire categories of people. Say everyone from Venezuela gets paroled into the country, not on a case-by-case basis. So I would focus on the statutory provisions. Another very important statutory provision states that if you are going to come here and seek asylum, we are required to hold you in some kind of custody until your asylum claim is resolved. And so that's another area that I would go into. I would cross-examine or question their decision to not hold people in custody.
What would you say to critics who claim this impeachment effort is a partisan attempt to remove a cabinet member?
I think that I've just laid out why that's absolutely not true. One of the challenges that we've had with this administration is I would describe it almost as a form of anarchy. Our government is based on the idea that there is that we will adhere to the rule of law. So if there's a speed limit of 75, we drive 75. If there's a stop sign, we stop. If you don't do those things, you are considered to have broken the law, and there can be and should be consequences for that. Yet with this administration, we have the people at the very top that are breaking the law. And an example is Joe Biden, who, despite what the Supreme Court has said with student loans, has continued to attempt to forgive student loans, even though he has absolutely no legal authority or right to do so whatsoever. And I would say the same with Mayorkas. This is not partisan. It doesn't matter to me what administration is in place. If we start allowing or start turning a blind eye to or start ignoring or start excusing the idea that the people at the very top are not subject to the rule of law, we've lost our country. We've created a two-tier justice system. And so I often say that usually anarchy comes from the bottom. It's people who are attempting to overthrow the government. The bizarre part of what we're living through right now is the anarchy is coming from the top. It's coming from Joe Biden. It's coming from Mayorkas. It's coming from these folks who are literally not just ignoring the law. They are blatantly violating the law and saying, so what are you going to do about it?
What steps do you want to see taken to help the crisis at the border? And why do you think your party so heavily opposed the Senate border bill negotiated by Senator Lankford?
So a couple of things. We have to finish the wall. We have got to finish the wall. What I've been down there and I've been to two locations where the wall was left unfinished, but they built roads so that they could finish the wall. And what you see is just massive numbers of humanity coming through in those particular areas. So that's one of the things that we have to do. We also have to do the Remain in Mexico policy. There's just no question that we cannot incentivize people to come to this country by saying, if you come here illegally 10 years down the road, you may very well get thrown out. But in the meantime, you're going to have children here, you're going to have grandchildren here, you're going to embed yourselves in the community, and then you're going to have the Democrats scream and jump up and down and rend their clothing, pull their hair and say, wait, we can't be deporting these people. They've been here for 10 years. So we've just got to fundamentally change the way that we are dealing with this. As far as the Senate bill, that is not a border security bill. That is an amnesty bill. H.R. 2 is a border security bill, and it gives us the tools and gives our Border Patrol the tools that they need to actually secure our border. The Senate bill was, I wouldn't describe it as a joke. I would describe it as downright dangerous. It would allow between 5,000 and 8,500 people a day day to cross into this country illegally before there would be any kind of restrictions imposed. Well, the people aren't stupid. The cartels can figure that one out. They can start figuring out how to send people across so that they send 5 to 8,500 people a day. In addition to which, it would allow the president to declare an emergency and say 8,500 people isn't enough. We need more. Let's let 10,000 in. We've got a surge on the border. We've got a caravan that has shown up. We need to let 20,000 in today. Number two, and then another thing is that restriction only lasted until 2025, and then it was again, Katie bar the door, as many as they could possibly shove across that line, that barrier, the non-existent barrier, I guess you'd say, they would be able to do that. The money that they were requesting, and I think it was $15 billion or $20 billion, it was to process people more quickly. It was not a border security bill, and people need to understand that it was an amnesty bill. I don't know how long Langford got taken for a ride, but he did. And it was a bad bill that none of us can support.
Special Counsel Robert Hur will testify this week in a public hearing on his findings in the case of President Biden's mishandling of classified documents. You sit on the Judiciary Committee. What will you be looking to find out from the special counsel?
Well, I think that we're all very, very interested in his personal observations of the president. It's rather a strange time that we're living in when we are told that we cannot believe our lying eyes. You watch President Biden. We know that he is not capable of actually managing and overseeing this country and acting as president. Hurd just confirmed that. He had the personal ability to do that, and he confirmed it. And for me, I want to talk to him about why in the world wouldn't you charge him? The idea that he's not capable of being held accountable for violating the law and holding and classified documents when he had absolutely no right to do so, but he's capable of running the country. I think what we saw the other night in the State of the Union address is someone who they had obviously given him medication so that he could stand up there and yell at us. But all he was doing was reading a teleprompter. And any time that he went off script, you could see that he was nothing but a befuddled old man. So I kind of want to watch how this develops and watch and engage with Mr. Hur on what his observations were.
You touched on the president's State of the Union address in what critics are calling a hyper-partisan speech. What did you make of the address?
I thought that it was horrific. To have the president stand up there and as partisan as he was, just sit there for an hour and scream at everybody. It was a very bizarre thing to observe.
Congress avoided a partial government shutdown this week, but there's another funding deadline looming 2 weeks from now when basically legislation for defense, state, and homeland security departments will have to be passed. What's your sense of how far apart the parties are on those negotiations, and do you think a deal gets done?
You know, one of the things that I've been so frustrated about in coming here is that I believe that the American people know that this is a situation that can be solved and resolved, but we have political leaders that don't allow that to happen. We're heading towards $35 trillion in debt. Mm-hmm. We're heading to the situation where our interest payments exceed what we spend on defense. We have agencies that have gone rogue, such as the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and others that are blatantly violating people's constitutional rights, such as the First Amendment. In fact, when Mayorkas came before our committee, that's what I focused on, is the manner in which the Department of Homeland Security is violating citizens' First Amendment rights. And yet the Congress fails time and time and time and time again to use the power of the purse to rein in these agencies and to force them to adopt policies that are in the best interest of the American public. So I voted against the monstrosity that was passed last week because it isn't a budget bill. I voted against the monstrosity last week, and I will vote against the one this week as well, because we're not being serious about actually cutting spending and actually cutting out programs that are not just bad ideas, but at this point are incredibly destructive to our republic. So I will continue to vote against these bills so long as we refuse to use the power of the purse to go in and take out programs that should not be funded. And that we continue to refuse to hold the administration responsible for the bad decisions that they're making.
Congresswoman Harriet Hageman of the great state of Wyoming, thanks for your time. Have a great week.
Thanks, Mike.